There are three great planes when it comes to Hermetics, and this and what we are discussing are the planes of correspondence, which is the eighth chapter in the KYBALION Hermetic philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. The great second Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony and an agreement and a correspondence between the several planes of manifestation or reality, life, and being. This truth, rather, is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source. And we have discovered this in our previous adventures, you could call them. And the same laws and principles and characteristics apply to each unit or combination of units of activity as each manifests its own phenomena upon its own plane. For the purposes of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena, known, namely, as the three great planes. And these three are, as you may have already thought or considered, number one, the great physical plane, number two, the great mental plane, and number three, the great spiritual plane. Now, each of these three are broken down into 7 subplanes or subcategories. But these divisions between the physical, the mental, and the spiritual realm, as the book says, these divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, because, for the truth is that all of the three divisions, or each plane, are but part of one scale, or as the book says here, are but ascending degrees upon the great scale of life, and the lowest point of which is an undifferentiated matter, and the highest point of that is that of spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other so that no hard or fast division may be made between the higher phenomena of the physical plane and the lower of that of the mental, and the same with the higher of the mental and the lower of that of the spiritual. And so in the last couple videos, we talked about what is discussed here as the fourth dimension, because a student of occult philosophy or esoteric or metaphysical philosophy will come to this question: what really is a plane? Is it a place of dimension? Or is it a condition or a state? And the answer is somewhat in the middle, as always, the paradox that both are true at the same time, being that it is really just one thing. Now, what that means is that there is a fourth dimension, and this dimension may be called the dimension of vibration, which is the cause and the source for everything that we see and experience here in the physical realm, as well as the mental realm and the spiritual realm. Remember, at the smallest level, everything is vibrations, waves. And so learning that from the highest manifestation to the lowest manifestation, everything and all things vibrate. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but as in different directions and in a different manner, and the degrees of the rate of vibration constitute the degrees of measurement on this scale. And so, in other words, the different vibrations allow for the different creations or manifestations for what we see, and also what we experience in the mental realm and the spiritual plane. Now, let us get now to where we have gotten to so far in this chapter. And if you are joining me, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you joining me. Once again, we are reading the KYBALION Hermetic philosophy for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind. So through an increased awareness of this wisdom of the ages, as I like to call it, but through an increased awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us, because our lives are made up of moments. And if we can stack better moments, then hopefully we can increase the quality of our lives. Now, with that being said, the 7 subplanes of the physical realm are these. There are 3 planes of matter, A, B, and C. A comprises the forms of matter in solids, liquids, and gases. B comprises higher, more subtle forms of matter. And C, also the most subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which is not suspected, the book says, by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which was the 7th. Once again, there are 3 planes of matter. The ethereal plane, once again, these are the 7 minor physical planes. And then there are also the 3 planes of energy. The ethereal plane there, or the plane of ethereal substance, is a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity pervading all universal space. So this is the ether, acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy, such as light, heat, electricity, etc. And so-called, the etheric substance forms a connection and a connecting link between matter itself and energy, and partakes of the nature of both. So this is a very interesting aspect of the ether, that it partakes of the nature of both matter and energy, because it is an intermediary. But next, above the plane of ethereal substance, is the planes of energy, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science. Its 7 subplanes, respectively: heat, light, magnetism, electricity, attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, and chemical affinity, etc. And several other forms of energy include indicated by scientific experiments, but as yet not named or classified. So, now we go on. We've had the great physical plane and its 7 subplanes, which are 3 forms of matter, 3 forms of energy, and the etheric substance, which ties those together as an intermediary. Now, we have the second great plane, which is the mental plane, and its 7 subplanes. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work. Remember, I am no master, and I'm just a student and a seeker, and I'm on this journey by myself, and so there are probably other places that you can find very, very deep conversations and elaborations and explanations, which, as the book states, are foreign to the purpose of this particular introductory work, at least as the reason we are doing it here. But once again, thank you for joining me on this journey together so that we may hopefully learn and grow. But it says we may as well mention them anyways here, and they are as follows. So the 7 subplanes of the great mental plane. Number 1 is the plane of mineral mind. Number 2 is the plane of elemental mind. And there's 2 of those. Number 3, the plane of plant mind. So the mineral, the elemental, the plant kingdom. The plane of animal mind, which comes after the second plane of elemental mind. And then after the plane of animal mind comes the third plane of elemental mind. And then finally, the plane of human mind, comprising the 7 mental planes. And these, I think, in other works, can be described as kingdoms: the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom. The plane of mineral mind, the book continues, comprises the, quote, states or conditions of the units or entities or groups and combinations of the same, which animate the forms known to us as minerals, chemicals, etc. So this is the plane of the mineral kingdom or mineral mind. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms, and Corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities. So even the mineral kingdom, the rocks, are but just the bodies of the entity that is the rock itself. Very interesting. I haven't ever heard it put that way. Just as a man's body, it was about to say, I should have kept reading. Those of you that have joined me before know that I like to ramble and rant, so we'll see if we can avoid doing that too much today and make some good progress, because this chapter asks that of us, because it's a longer one. So the plane of mineral mind, once again, is the states or conditions of the minerals. But the molecules and the atoms that form these are not merely, they're just merely the material bodies of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form and not himself. Just as our bodies, ladies and gentlemen, is our material form, but it is not who we really are, even though we've been taught that that's the way it really is, and we go around wearing this persona that we've been given and the circumstances of life that we've been prescribed to. However, these entities, the book continues, may be called souls in one sense. So even a rock has its own soul, and are living beings of a very low degree of development, life, and mind. Just as little more than the units rather of living energy, which comprise the higher subdivisions of the highest physical plane. The average mind does not generally attribute the possession of mind, soul, and life to the mineral kingdom. Of course not. But all occultists recognize the existence of the very same, and modern science is rapidly moving forward to the point of view of the Hermetic and the ancient wisdom of the ages. In this respect, the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles have their loves and hates, so to speak, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non-affinities, and etc. And some of the more daring and modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will, emotion and feelings of the atoms differ only in a degree of that of man, of men and women, of the kingdom of humanity. And so, as we've seen and as we've learned, the difference between the physical realm and the spiritual realm is as above, so below. And even though they would seem so opposite, two ends of one pole, they are yet one, and the difference between the two is merely a variance of degree. It's an important concept that is repeated often in this philosophy, and it's one that requires much contemplation, much meditation. And I will remind us of this every time because it's the most important lesson, I think, from Hermes, or Thoth, the Egyptian sage god, Tahat, thrice greatest. But the way that we can begin to understand this amazing wisdom is through a pure philosophy. And a pure philosophy, Hermes tells us in the very first words of the prophecies of Hermes, is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God, the universe, the nature of the things that are. But what did he say that we must do to understand this? Well, a pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through what? Ladies and gentlemen, you should have it memorized by now if you've been here before. A constant contemplation. Yes, you got it. A constant meditation, a constant ponderation, a constant rumination, a constant thinking upon. In order to what? Attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God, in other words, reality. And as described here in the very beginning of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Divine Pymander, there can be no spiritual pursuit, pure philosophy, more true or just than to know the things that are, and to acknowledge thanks for all things to him that made them, that which hath made them, which thing we shall hopefully not cease continually doing. And these were the first words of Hermes to his son. He said, O my son, write this book both for humanity's sake and for reverence and honor to Atum. And always the funniest questions after that. But we did this series and the entire series of the Hermetica on this channel. So if you want to check that out, be sure to go back and check that out, ladies and gentlemen, because it got us to where we are now, and it helps us gain that contemplation and that deeper understanding of this possibility that all the way down to the lowest form of matter as rocks in the mineral kingdom, all the way to the spirit, there is this very interesting connection, a similarity between those, such as things as loves and hates and likes and dislikes, affinities and non-affinities. Often when I'm trying to understand personally the life of the mineral kingdom that we have so often taken for granted, like they're just rocks, there's nothing. But rocks do transform over time and become different things, and there's other things that they do not become. And so there is these kind of affinities and non-affinities, and the more daring of modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will and emotions and feelings of the atoms themselves, remember, this goes down to the smallest level, differ only in a degree from the same thing that makes up our very own selves. And so, we have no time or space to argue this matter here. Once again, that is a different podcast. However, all occultists know it a fact to be, and others are referred to some of the more recent scientific works for outside corroboration. There are the usual 7 subdivisions to this plane. The plane of elemental mind, A, which is the second plane of the mental plane. That makes sense. Once again, if you missed the intro, there are 3 great planes in Hermetics, and in reality, as taught to us from this ancient Hermetic philosophy. Or maybe just from the KYBALION. I will also respect that. But the first is the physical plane, the second is the mental, and the third is the spiritual, in the opposite form of how I just showed that. But so now we're looking at the 7 subdivisions of the mental, great mental plane, because we went through the 7 subdivisions of the physical plane last week. And the first division of the mental plane was that of mineral mind. The second is the plane of elemental mind. A comprises the state or condition and degree of mental and vital development of a class of entities unknown to the average man, but recognized to the occultists. They are invisible to the ordinary senses of man, but nevertheless exist and play their part on the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand, and of the entities of the plant kingdom on the other. So once again, the elemental kingdom is playing and working in between. There's always these intermediaries, just like air, when you're studying fire, earth, water, and air. Air is an intermediary between the others, allowing for certain actions and reactions, and the functioning of nature as we see it. Once again, if you're wondering, like, why the heck are we even talking about this? This is a discovery of the nature of reality. And so it can get pretty deep at times. But for some reason, I feel it is extremely important to understanding ourselves personally and creating a new perspective on our lives and our world that we understand through this research, that we create for ourselves, personally and collectively, And that through this awareness, once again, as I always say, we can have a better life experience, despite this seeming like it has no practical application at all. The metaphors and the ahas and the enlightenments are what allows for those practical, personal realizations and revelations to where we can apply this amazing wisdom to ourselves. Now, once again, the chemical, the plant kingdom interact with these elements. And as we know, elements are fundamental for the functioning of reality and is what is comprised and is what creates and makes up reality. And so between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand and that of the entities of the plant kingdom on the other, there are 7 subdivisions to this plane also. So it can get very complex because each of these seven subplanes have their own 7 underneath of them. And how far that goes down, I'm not sure, but that would make sense when you're talking about the functioning and the structure of reality. But the plane of plant mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprise the states or conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world, the vital and mental phenomena of which is fairly well understood by the average intelligent person. Many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants have been published during the last few decades, and plants have life, mind, and souls. As funny as it sounds, we have come to understand this and know this. If you haven't heard that yet, look it up. It's very amazing, actually, the research that has been done for that. And I think the connection and the harmony in the plant kingdom is far beyond that of the ascending kingdoms of mind. However, that is an interesting debate in its own. Mind and life have been published during the last day. Plants have life, mind, and souls, as well as have the animals, man. And he even adds, Superman is not even in quotes. William Walker Atkinson, which was one of the 3 initiates. The plane of elemental mind, B, so it's the second elemental mind, in its 7 subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of a higher form of elemental or unseen entities playing their part in the general work of the universe, the mind and life of which form the part of the scale between the plane of the plant mind and the plane of animal mind. Okay, the entities partaking of the nature of both. So I'm starting to discover here, we have these different kingdoms. We have the mineral, the plant, the animal, and the human. But in between, acting as an intermediary and partaking of the nature of both always is an elemental plane or activity or function. Because remember, a plane is not merely a dimension or place, but it is also not only a state or condition, it is both, or it partakes of the nature of both. Just as these elemental planes in the plane of mind partake of the nature of both. The plane of animal mind and its 7 subdivisions comprise the state of beings or souls animating the animal forms of life, familiar to us all, of course. It is not necessary to go in details regarding the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom, for the animal world is as familiar to us as our own world, pretty much, because this seems to be the easiest to relate to, I would guess. Now we have the third, or C, the plane of elemental mind, C, and its 7 subdivisions comprises those entities or beings invisible, as are all such elemental forms, which partake of the nature of both the animal and human kingdoms or life in a degree and in certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. So these elements operating as an intermediary between the mental plane of that of the animal and human kingdom, have their own form of this kind of intelligence. The plane of human mind, now finally, the seventh mental plane, in its 7 subdivisions comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are very common to us in our lives, in our varying grades, degrees, and divisions. In this connection, the book states, we wish to point out the fact that the average man of today occupies but the 4th subdivision of the plane of human mind, and only the most intelligent, which is a, kind of a vague term, but just to be general here for purposes of study, crossed the borders of the 5th subdivision. It has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage. Or maybe we have reverted really recently back to this stage by some reason, which we'll not go into. But it may take many more years for us to move on to the 6th and 7th subdivisions and beyond. This is what is talked about in Power versus Force and The Eye of the Eye, as well as Transcending the Levels of Consciousness by Dr. David R. Hawkins and his work with kinesiology and mapping out the levels of consciousness for humanity, and then studying and measuring through his practice, which was, that's its own deep thing. But most of humanity, according to his study, live at this level just above the median. So, of course, it goes from 0 to 1,000, and we're somewhere around 400s, 500s, which is very funny that it's the same thing mentioned here in the KYBALION, in this Hermetic philosophy, that those of us on this plane of human mind that has its own 7 subdivisions, or 7 levels of consciousness, so to speak, are on the 4th, and only the highest of us, the most enlightened, are barely on the borders of the 5th. Very interesting. It will take many more years for us to move on to the 6th and 7th subdivisions and beyond. But remember that there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees. Okay, I thought they weren't going to acknowledge the previous advanced civilizations that obviously have existed before us, and we are just now beginning to consider and agree that this is obviously the case, and there is no argument to it, and we're barely just beginning to discover the advanced ancient technologies that we have no memory of, or at least that memory has been hidden from the masses of us. But once again, that's a different subject for a different day. But remember that there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees, and then on to the higher levels of consciousness, and on to the higher planes of that of the 7th plane, of the plane of mind, or the mental plane, which is that of the human mind, and then the subdivisions of that being the different levels of consciousness. Our own race is the 5th, with stragglers from the 4th, which has set foot upon the path. Wait a minute. Really? Because I've heard talk of the 5 eras, or the 5 ages of man or humanity. I mean, there's sometimes a different number. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 7. Depending where you look, the different Baktuns and the different great cycles and great years, but this is correlating with a lot, and I can obviously tell that William Walker Atkinson and the 2 other initiates had studied many esoteric and occult traditions. To find this knowledge here, though, is another affirmation, another confirmation, actually, or another corroborating piece of thought that says here, remember that there have been, whether you want to call them humans or different races or whatever, but there have been civilizations before us which have gone to much higher degrees of enlightenment and understanding of the nature of reality, and then on to even higher ones. It says here, our own race is the fifth of these. So we are the fifth edition, and meaning that there has been four great cataclysms, or maybe even just changing of the guard, so to speak, a transfer, a shift, a reset. I had no clue we were going this way today. We're looking at the mental plane, the plane of mind, and its 7 subdivisions, but I guess it's all connected, because even looking at that, we come to this fact that our own race is the fifth, quote from the book, with stragglers from the fourth. Those stragglers from the fourth makes me wonder which has set foot upon the path. And the book continues, and there are few advanced souls of our own race who have outstripped the masses and who have passed on to the 6th and 7th subdivision, and some few being still further on. The man of the 6th subdivision will be the quote-unquote superhuman or Superman. He of the 7th will be the quote-unquote the overman. This is making me think of the great sages and masters that have come to the ability of manifestation almost instantly, can create reality with just a thought. In our consideration, the book continues, of the 7 minor mental planes, we have merely referred to the 3 elementary planes, not elementary, dear Watson, but the element planes in a general way, because that can get very deep and be an entire 17 books in itself. I added that bit. Book continues, we do not wish to go into this subject in detail in this work, for it does not belong to this part of the general philosophy and teachings. What part it does belong to is interesting to me. I would wonder about that, but we may say this much in order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes to the more familiar ones. The elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of mineral, plant, animal, and human mentality and life that the black keys on the piano do to the white keys. Think about that metaphor for a minute. These element planes, the elemental planes, have the same relation to the planes of the mineral, plant, and animal and human kingdoms as the same way black keys do to the white keys on a piano. The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, manifestations, I will add, different rates and modes of the vibration at the very lowest level, that is the cause for and the source of the certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys are entirely vital and necessary to play their part, in which their presence is necessary. Once again, I'm kind of elaborating my own thoughts with what I'm reading at the same time. They are also necessary as the connecting links of soul conditions, entity states, and etc. between the several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein, this last fact giving to the reader who can quote-unquote read between the lines, remember, constant contemplation, a new light upon the processes of evolution, and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between kingdom and kingdom. The great kingdoms of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and the esoteric writings are full of mentions of the elementals. The readers of Bulwer's Zanoni and similar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Made me think of the jinn there. I believe the jinn have been mentioned as elementals, these entities that live in between the mental and the physical planes, different planes of the great mental plane, the subdivisions. Very interesting. Passing on, the book continues from the great mental plane to the great spiritual plane. What shall we say? How can we explain these higher states of being, life, and mind to minds as yet unable to grasp and understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of human mind? So yeah, how could we go anywhere beyond when we're stuck on the fifth, or probably even the fourth subdivision of our own mental plane? So it's like, how can we possibly attempt? Well, there is a principle of correspondence, and that principle embodies the truth of as above, so below. And that there can be correlations to that, even though which we cannot understand, to that which we do understand, for purposes, once again, of study and thought. So, with that being said, the task is impossible. We can speak only in the most general terms. How may light be described to a man born blind? How sugar can be described to someone who has never tasted anything sweet? And how a harmony of sound could be described to someone who is born deaf? All that we can say is that the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane, each minor plane having its own 7 subdivision, once again, comprises beings possessing life, mind, and form as far above that of man and woman, humanity of today, as the latter is above the earthworm and the mineral, even certain forms of energy and matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds so far transcends ours that we can scarcely seem to think. And our mental processes also seem akin to the material processes, the matter of which their forms are composed is of the highest planes of matter. Nay, some are even said to be clothed in quote unquote pure energy, beings of light, is what I'm getting from that. What may be said of such beings? Well, on the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane exist beings of who we may speak of as angels or archangels or demigods. On the lowest minor planes dwell those souls, those great souls who we may have called masters, adepts. What's the other name? Avatars. And above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic hosts, unthinkable to man. Don't get caught up on the names here. Remember, a lot of names like angels and stuff like that are taken, instantly connected to Christianity and all the. Remember, this is a universal philosophy that does not hearken to any dogmatic religious structure. This is a universal philosophy. So with that being stated, we're being general. Remember just a second ago, how the heck can we even talk about this? It's stupid and it's an impossibility. But for purposes of study and of contemplation, we are going to be general in an attempt to describe such things. And so, above them come these things unthinkable to ourselves, as above those who may be without irreverence, may be called the gods, Hermes, Thoth. So high in the scale of being that their being, intelligence, and power be akin to those attributed by the races of men to their concepts of deity. Their concepts of deity. Remember, back in the beginning of this chapter, ladies and gentlemen, it talked about this scale. This scale is, let me just read it. For the purposes of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe is divided into 3 great classes of things going on. Phenomena, it calls it, and known as the 3 great planes, which is the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. However, going back to what we were just reading, these divisions are more or less arbitrary and artificial, for the truth is that all of this is a different degree ascending in the scales, the great scale of life and mind. The lowest point of which, differentiated matter, the highest point, that of spirit. And so, with that reminder, we come back to talking about this highest point of the scale, the gods, as we describe them, this concept of God or deity. These beings, being separate from Atum, the one God, universe, the source for all of this that is being described, but these beings are beyond even the highest flights of our own imagination. If we even want to believe that they exist. Then once again, this is your own interpretation. We're just studying the wisdom of the ages. But these beings are beyond the highest flights of the human imagination, the word divine being the only really one applicable term here. Many of these beings, as well as the quote-unquote angelic host, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe and play an important part in its affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution as well as cosmic progress. Their occasional intervention and assistance in human affairs have led to the many legends, beliefs, and religions and traditions of the race, past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world again and again, all under the law of the all, of course. But yet, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in, once again, the mind of the all. Remember, the most important understanding of all of this, the number one principle of the 7 Hermetic principles. What is it, ladies and gentlemen? The principle of mentalism. And what is the principle of mentalism? The all is mind, and the universe is mental. Everything in reality, or even all the things that we can't see, we're talking about the mental, spiritual, and the physical plane. All of this is contained as a thought within the mind of God. Does that mean that it's an illusion and it's not real? No, to us it's very real, and we are here. But we also have the contrary paradoxical fact that it is just that, a thought within the mind of God. Very interesting how thoth and thought are so close. And then we have the second principle of correspondence, which is as above, so below. The third, vibration. Nothing rests, everything vibrates. This is the cause and the source for everything we see that manifests in physical reality. And then later on, we have polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender, which I'm starting to understand relate to the spiritual, mental, and physical realms as you progress through the principles. Very deep. See, the more you go over this and go over this, you start to make these connections. You start to have these personal ahas, like, oh yeah, that seems to make sense with this part. And that seems to add into this part. But you have to remember the part that you had contemplated and comprehended previously for it to line up and cause a harmony or a synchronicity or some kind of resonation, all vibration terms. A resonance. But once again, they have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world again and again, all under the law of the all, but yet even the highest of these quote unquote angelic or advanced avatars and great demigods, the being, the highest gods that are below the all, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in, existing solely within the mind of God or the all. If you missed that chapter, be sure to go back and check that out. That was an awesome chapter. The all in all. And it was like, how is it possible that the all is immanent in, remaining within, inherent in, abiding within its universe and every part and particle within it, but yes, also at the same time, we are also God or the universe. And so I tried to describe this. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within our own mind, like when we're trying to do this thought process for ourselves to try to understand how everything is existent within the mind of God, the student, author, dramatist, painter, sculptor, in a sense, is also immanent in, remaining within, and abiding within the mental image also. So, in other words, the entire virtue, life, spirit of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. I've highlighted this. This is back in chapter 7, so just the previous chapter here. But at the bottom there, it says, consider this for a moment. I'd say consider this for a lifetime until the idea is thoroughly grasped. Because it makes sense of this and how all of these advanced beings, all the way from the mineral kingdom of rocks to the plant kingdom to the human kingdom, skip the animal kingdom there, sorry, all the way up to the divine, as we think of them, gods and demigods and avatars, like those who have reached the highest levels, if they even exist. Once again, this is a personal journey. If you don't believe any of this exists, then that's just fine. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. But all of this are as yet creations of the mind of God, as we are, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws that are created by this, I don't know, deep, elaborate, what do you call it when you like just go, you daydreaming, this daydream of the mind of God? But once again, they are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but still, they are but the elder brethren of the race, the advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren, and who have forgone the ecstasy of absorption by the all in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. Remember, that is the purpose. We are all on this upward journey along the path. They belong to the universe and are subject to its conditions, and they are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. Only the most advanced Hermeticists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the power manifested on the spiritual planes. And this is why I've done very little rambling this video, because these are areas that I have very little to say about, as is beyond my own personal experience, and I think some of it is purely speculation based on, long-standing thought traditions, esoteric traditions of thought. So we do give them respect and credit at the same time. The phenomena, though, the goings-on of this spiritual plane, the phenomena is so much higher than that of our own and that of the mental planes, that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same thing. Try to think of that deeply there. So we have three planes. We have a physical plane, a mental plane, and a spiritual plane. We exist mainly within the physical and mental planes, but we do have a partial spiritual existence as well, is my own personal understanding. But to think of such things would mean to go beyond the mental plane, and thinking takes place in the mental plane. So to do so would be an impossibility, Now I'll read what it said again. Only the most advanced Hermeticists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomena is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those whose minds have been carefully trained along the lines of the Hermetic philosophy for years, yes, those who have brought with them from the other incarnations the knowledge acquired previously. So once again, to get an understanding of this, what did Hermes tell us? Pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God, through many, many lifetimes. So get started now. It's like the people say about investing. You'll never, you'll always say, I wish I would have started a long time ago. Same thing for spiritual investing or spiritual progress along the path. Because surely it would take many you would have to bring the knowledge. This is saying, I mean, some people could have those satorais, but let me continue so we can come to an end here. I think we probably almost got an hour. These hours go so fast. It's like, holy cow, because it's so deep. Look, we almost made it to the end of the chapter. Let's just go ahead and finish it up. Sum it up, ladies and gentlemen, and leave that for the planes of correspondence. Now, once again, the teachings from previous other incarnations of knowledge acquired previously can comprehend just what is meant by the teaching regarding these spiritual planes, and much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermeticists as being too sacred and important and even dangerous for general public dissemination. I've kind of had a hesitation about sharing certain parts of this because I often wonder that, because it has been spoken about that this knowledge was kept hidden from the masses for a reason. But once again, the greatest times and minds of our entire history is when this knowledge and wisdom was discussed and compared and studied side by side in the halls of Alexandria, and later the great house of Baghdad, the house of wisdom, and even later the reemergence of this Hermetic and esoteric occult philosophy. Whenever it blossoms, we have a quote unquote renaissance. And these seem to be the greatest times of our history or the story. But that could just be that. Anyways, different subject once again. Let's get to the end here. So, the intelligent student, once again, important, even dangerous for public dissemination, is this understanding and the sacredness of the understanding of the spiritual planes. The intelligent student, however, may recognize what we mean by this when we state the meaning of spirit as used by Hermeticists akin to living power or animated force, inner essence, essence of life. Made me think of the dark crystal really quick there. Stealing essence. That's a different subject in its own as well, but an understanding of this meaning of spirit may be dangerous for a wider public knowledge because of such dark things. It's just my own opinion there, sorry. Which meaning, the book continues, quote, must not be confounded with that usually and commonly employed in connection with the term spirit. In example, religious or ecclesiastical or, holy, this kind of thing, etc., etc. To occultists, the word spirit is used in the sense of, quote, the animating principle, carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, and mystic force, etc. This seems to be extremely important. So this is something that gives me pause, and it's like, whoa, whoa. But seriously, to occultists, the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating principle carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, mystical force. See, this is where I think real magic comes into play, and you have to be extremely careful because if you know anything about Star Wars, the force is just the force. And there is a light side and there is a dark side, and the force works for both equally. And so often it is easier and more accessible to choose the side of anger and rage and unbridled, uncontrolled emotion, giving rise to the dark. Or there is the adept, the master, who has spent their entire life in the temple from a very young age, meditating and training and coming in harmony with themselves, their own mental states and their emotions to become masters of themselves and this force, which is very real in life. This is just a great metaphor from a great, uh, I don't know, I guess he wasn't an author. They were, what were they, screenplay writer? But this metaphor is very true, ladies and gentlemen. This goes for this idea of spirit, the idea of power, living energy, or mystical force, etc. And occultists know that that which is known to them as spiritual power may be employed, okay, it's going to say it right here, for evil as well as good ends, in accordance with the principle of polarity. A fact which has been recognized by the majority of religions in their conceptions of the adversary, Satan, which is what Satan means, the adversary, Beelzebub, the devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc. And so the known regarding these planes have been kept in the Holy of Holies and all esoteric fraternities and occult orders in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here, that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them. And the swing of the pendulum of rhythm, which is another great principle of reality, will inevitably swing back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path. So if you choose the easy route, so to speak, I've always had this saying, like, the easy way or the right way is actually hard, and the hard way is actually easy. What does that mean? It's a paradox. It's easier to do shitty stuff, and it's harder to do good stuff, but the results are much better. Because then you don't have to walk once again on the swing of the pendulum of the principle of rhythm and polarity to take back and walk once again down the path. This is getting a little out there, so I'm going to tie it up and we'll put a bow on it here. But to each, but even such a soul. So let me go back here. This is intense, ladies and gentlemen. This could have been its own video. Maybe we'll come back to this one day because it's an important lesson. But once again, if those that choose, it's maybe said here that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them, and the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell, owing to their evil actions. To me, this is describing like 100 different stories, whether they be movies, series, books, series. This this is repeated so often, and it's almost like a lesson, a subconscious knowledge to all of us that we know innately. And that is a very real part of Atum, the one God, or everything existing within the mind of God here that we find ourselves in. But with always the torture of having remembered the heights from which they fell owing to their misuse of their abilities, the legends of the fallen angels, having a basis in these kind of facts as well as advanced occultists know. The striving for selfish power on the spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously risen. But to even such a soul, the opportunity of return is given, and such souls make the return journey, paying the penalty according to the invariable laws. In conclusion, to the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane, and the planes of correspondence, we would again remind us, the students, that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth, as above, so below, as below, so above, all of the 7 Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, spiritual, and the many subplanes. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all the planes, for all are held within the mind of the all. The principle of correspondence manifests in all, for there is a correspondence, a harmony and agreement between the several varying planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go on to make up the planes arise from vibration, as we have already explained and delved into. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, and the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomena having its ebb and flow, rise and fall, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on every plane, every effect having its cause and every cause having its effect. And finally, the 7th Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, manifests on every plane, operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below. As above, so below. As below, so above. As below, so above. These centuries old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of universal knowledge, of universal phenomena, the universal goings on. We need a little levity, ladies. This was heavy, but amazing. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will now begin to see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of this great principle of correspondence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a boom to the principle of correspondence and the planes of reality. And the nature of reality? That was amazing, ladies and gentlemen. That is a boom to the 2nd Hermetic principle, as above, so below. As below, so above. And so hopefully now we have a much deeper grasp, a little bit more of an understanding on the nature of reality, and probably the most famous Hermetic statement. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, that was amazing. Once again, I have no clue. I almost wonder if I didn't even record that whole thing. That would be sad. But I really always want, I have no clue where these journeys, these discoveries, adventures are going to take us. And that was a fantastic one, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and understanding of the nature of ourselves, the nature of reality, spirituality, psychology, all of the planes and their subdivisions. So that through this awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. And remember to seek to discover the wisdom of the ages, the lost wisdom of the ages, and the mysteries of our history. As well as remember that there is no way to happiness because happiness is the way. It is what we must create the ability within ourselves to bring to life. Doesn't mean there aren't struggles and challenges and things that we must go through to grow through as a soul on this path, moving ever higher, ever onward, ever higher towards spirit. I forget exactly how it worded that last chapter, but it was really great. It was a beautiful finish. But if we can create that ability within ourselves, all the things we're telling ourselves, oh, when I get that car or have this house or have so much money or whatever we're wanting, that becomes relevant because then we are there, and then hopefully the entire journey to those things is wonderful. It's the old striving versus arriving, and so many of us spend our lives striving to get there. And when we get there, there isn't a parade, there's no bands, there isn't a giant celebration. We're like, what the heck? I thought this was going to be the thing because all we've ever practiced was striving and we never practiced arriving and being there and bringing happiness to life rather than trying to wring it out of everything we do. It's a process, not a result. I'll write that book one day, but there's many books that already discuss that topic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to expand the description to get this book for yourself so you can put it on your shelf. It is an Amazon affiliate link, so I make a few cents from that, as well as the Corpus Hermeticum and the Hermetica, the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, the Wisdom of the Ages. And put them on your shelf so you can follow along in future episodes or just to have for personal reference. Physical copies are key. Also, a link to my Etsy shop and my landscape paintings, CLC Paint. I also have a YouTube channel where I did tutorials, hour-long Bob Ross style tutorials. So if you want to learn to paint with me, you can do that as well. CLC Paint YouTube channel. And there is also a link to C60 Power, the ultimate antioxidant known to man. Give yourself the gift of health, ladies and gentlemen. I've been using it for years. And no news is good news, I guess. All right. We'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah, I also have a Patreon if you want to support the work we do. Buy me a coffee or whatever, you know how that goes, even though I drink tea. Time for some tea, ladies and gentlemen. Take a break and contemplate this incredible lesson today of the second Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above, in the planes of correspondence. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. No, 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 no. If I can find the button. Thank you. Love and appreciate you all. Till next time.